Hi everyone. Today's episode takes us both to Maine and Michigan. First off, a hunter heads out with his brother-in-law only to be terrified by what he encounters in a clearing in the fall of 2004. Then next up, a rookie journalist in Michigan travels to Detroit to cover a story, but what happens on the drive there shocks him in a way he's never felt before. So cozy up and get ready for two disturbing encounters that will have you peeking around corners for an ungodly amount of time. But while you're cautiously moving around, be sure to take the time to subscribe so we can do this all over again tomorrow. Great. Now let's get into the stories. I will never forget the day we encountered what I'm now sure was a dogman. It was the fall of 2004, and I was hunting in Maine's woods with my brother-in-law, Greg. We'd been walking through tough terrain all morning, seeing nothing, but we were still hopeful that our hard work would pay off by the end of the day. We were pretty deep in and didn't have cell reception, so we were relying on walkie-talkies to keep in touch. At one point, we had separated from one another to cover more ground, so I ended up getting to a small clearing first. The dogs instantly smelled something as we walked in and began making a lot of noise, going nuts, barking and sniffing around. At first, I thought it must have been an opossum or raccoon hiding up in a tree, but then something caught my eye about 30 yards away. And almost as soon as I saw it, it noticed me too and ran behind a log into some of the foliage, where it stopped and looked back. I hushed the dogs and called them back to me to leash them up. Side note in all of this, be sure to only ever head into the woods with well-trained dogs. So anyway, I took a few steps towards the thing to see what it was, and peering back at me was the face of a dog, but huge and hairy with eyes that had the intelligence of a gorilla. The look on this humanoid dog's face made me feel like it was sizing me up, actually thinking and trying to figure out what I was doing there. Its eyes darted from my head to my feet, which totally made my skin crawl. I'd never seen anything like it. It was dark brown and about 8 feet tall, with long, muscular legs and large hands with claws. This creature thing stood up on its hind legs when I saw it, I think to get a better look at me, but then all of a sudden it dropped back down to all fours, and then I couldn't see it as well. And right when it did this, I heard the noise of twigs snapping behind me, which made the thing run off into the woods. Spun back towards the snapping noise to find out that it was Greg, and when he got near where I was standing, he could see the look on my face and asked, "What the heck is going on?" He wanted to know why my two dogs were so upset and barking and circling, and I looked the way that I did. Something was obviously up. I told him I had seen this crazy dog-looking creature run into the woods and it had put the dogs all in a tizzy. He looked confused and thought about it, but said that Maine doesn't have wild dogs, and Maine doesn't have coyotes anywhere except in the northern regions. We didn't know anything about any of Maine's actual dogman sightings at the time. We'd heard about them just as random stories, and we'd always figured that the creatures were just a myth or maybe something unknown to science. Anyway, we harnessed the dogs and decided to check out the area where it had headed off to. We walked around for about 20 minutes, but we didn't head too far into the woods from the clearing. But we never found anything, no signs of it at all. Next, we decided to just head back to the truck and go back down the logging road towards an area where there was cell phone reception. We decided we would definitely feel safer with our phones working and maybe even hunt that area for a bit. As we drove down the road, Greg was still totally consumed by what I had seen and kept asking me about it and talking about the Maine dogmen. He had stories he had heard. He said he couldn't wait to call his friends and tell them about the sighting and see if they knew anything. And then we got a little lower down the road and we pulled off along the side to get out and walk into the woods again. We headed off together with the dogs, and as soon as we got a ways into the trees, we noticed a weird scent in the area, like a musky scent, and the dogs became hyper alert again. We paused to look around and figure out what was going on, and that's when we saw it again. Greg saw it this time too, and the creature was looking directly at us and staring unblinking. It was standing stock still, and we stopped too, frozen with fear. It didn't move at all for about a minute, which was terrifying, not knowing what would happen and if it would charge us or what. Greg and I were frozen to our spots, just looking at the creature, which was about 30 yards ahead down the path at this point. Finally, Greg snapped to and yelled, "Get back to the truck!" We all came back to reality, ran back to the road, and jumped in the truck, slammed the door shut, and headed off. To our horror, the dogman, or whatever you want to call it, had started running towards us as we were driving away. Its eyes were glowing and burning a hole in the rearview mirror. I couldn't decide if I wanted to keep looking at it or just keep my eyes shut. We also couldn't figure out how this thing could run so fast. Our truck could only go 30 miles an hour, but that dogman kept up with us easily as we drove away. I don't know why we didn't stop right then and there, get out of the truck and try to shoot it, but something made me keep driving away until we saw it stop chasing us and disappear over a hill. We have no idea why it changed its mind, or if it just wanted us to continue out of there and it was happy enough with that. From what we later learned, in Maine there are sightings reported all over the state. There have been a few reported encounters in central Maine in particular. Some of Maine's dogmen are Bigfoot-like creatures. They have no fur on their body and appear to be hairless with wrinkled gray-brown skin. But ours did have dark brown-black fur all over its body. Also, the others we read about were described as about 7 feet tall, weighing about 400 pounds. I'm sure ours was taller than 7 feet. I'm guessing more like 8. I mean, it was huge, even in the forest next to the trees. Because of so many conflicting accounts, we don't know exactly what it was that we saw or what it even wanted from us. But we do know that the creature is real and it is out there. Whatever it was, I'll never forget its eyes searing into my soul. I can still see that image when I close my eyes, which I'm not embarrassed to tell you has made sleeping really difficult. In the end, we didn't report the encounter to anyone, not even Greg's friends, because we figured no one would believe us and it was just best to keep our mouths shut. But please be aware that it seems like the creature will follow you if you try to drive away or get away from it. I'm not sure of any other details or anything, but I can say for certain that our encounter is definite evidence that dogmen do exist in Maine. We're sure that the creature was something cryptid or hybrid. We've never seen it again. We don't ever want to. Another update is we both pitched in to get a better hunting truck that's more reliable and can drive faster than 30 miles an hour. We also haven't been back to that area, and we now drive a few hours in the opposite direction whenever we head out to hunt. I'm a local journalist, and my job is relentless. I'd spent a lifetime chasing down truth from rumors and following news that would frequently even take me out of my hometown of Troy, Michigan. In 2014, the editorial team asked me to follow a story down in Detroit. Now, normally I would jump on this opportunity, but this time I sort of had a strange feeling holding me back. Part of it was due to my uneasiness of driving after shoulder surgery, but partly it was due to listening to my colleagues talk about Route 75 and how it's a paranormal magnet. I was pacing outside my boss's office, trying to think of an excuse to not go, but I noticed Frank packing up his desk. I remembered that he was moving to another job outside of Troy, and that meant that my chance for promotion was maybe finally here. So I decided to swallow my anxiousness and take on the story. I called my dad and asked if I could borrow his car. Young journalists aren't paid enough to own their own yet. "Detroit?" he said. "Well, I can come along. I'll stop at your Uncle Sean's place." I cringed from the inside, but agreed. Dad and I don't have much in common. I'm timid and antisocial, and he's outspoken and loud. However, I really wanted the Detroit story to help me with the promotion, and it probably would mean a lot to him, too. Neither of us had any commitments after work, so we headed right out, straight down Route 75. Dad tried to turn up some conversation, but I was tired and wanted to be fully awake the next morning, so I started to nod off in the car. Detroit isn't far from Troy, but every second felt like an hour. I don't remember when I actually fell asleep, probably when Dad started telling stories of strange creatures that had been seen lurking around. Maybe I should have paid attention to that part. Not soon into the trip, I heard a loud thud and hit my head on the car window that I was leaning against. "Hey, are you up?" Dad said. "I think I saw something. Probably it was nothing," he whispered. I shook my head no and just answered in murmurs. It was dark and we were no longer on 75. I remember making frustrated remarks, but his attention was completely somewhere else, and his hands were gripping the steering wheel tightly. "You were asleep. There was an accident on Route 75, and I knew a way to bypass it over here by the fairgrounds and the cemetery. Well, I thought I did." I rolled my eyes as I reached in my pockets to open the map on my phone. I tried to unlock my phone, but realized it was completely dead. I was so fixated on reaching Detroit that it had slipped my mind to charge it before leaving. The car kept moving along, but then it seemed to slow down. I opened my eyes wider, forced myself to wake up, and turned towards my dad to see his eyes wide open and staring out the rearview mirror. I still remember the look on his face with his jaw hanging down. He kept driving ahead slowly, but his eyes were completely glued to the rearview mirror. Not knowing what was going on, I asked him to stop and let me drive. He kept acting strangely and not stopping. I asked him again to stop the car and switch seats with me, and he was hesitant at first, but finally did agree. He stopped and I got out of the car, and as soon as I got out, I heard this noise off in the direction of the cemetery that caught my attention. I was looking around to figure out what it was, looking at the horizon, and what I saw was nothing like I could have ever imagined. It was a dark-haired, furry, wolf-looking creature, but it was huge, as big as a fully grown horse. I squinted my eyes, thinking it was a play of the light, but its bright yellow eyes were staring right back at me, right into mine, and they were definitely real. Even though the creature was at least a few hundred feet away from us, its incredible size was clearly noticeable. Its presence behind our stopped car as it was looking towards us was something I could feel even that far away. I will never forget the feeling I had when I first saw it. It was majestic and had a sense of undeniable power. I felt it could make anyone feel shivers down their spine and make their hands quiver just like mine were at that moment. But since I'm a journalist, I decided I should capture this beast with my camera and show people what I saw. I slowly moved my hand towards the door handle while also reaching for my camera. In my head, I was moving slowly enough that it wouldn't notice me, but the creature, even though it was still a decent distance away, did notice. I was wrong. The beast howled a cry at the most unbelievable spectrum and rose up on its two back feet. Its muscled body was now at least 9 feet tall, and its dark fur made it seem even more ominous and horrifying. However, the strangest part of it was the creature's human-like build. The only typical wolf features were the tail, the sharp set of paws with claws at the end and a snarling wolf head. By this point, my dad had jumped inside the car into the passenger seat, and I had moved across to the driver's side. He quickly helped me open the door, yanked me inside, yelled to hit the accelerator. At first, I was in shock, but he pushed my knee and slapped me to my senses. I shut the half-open door and pressed the pedal to its limit without even looking back in the rearview mirror. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, white-knuckled, and we were shaking as I drove away. I tried to process what had just happened to us these past 1 to 2 longest minutes of my life. My father saw it too, and he knew what he saw, but he couldn't verbally acknowledge it. But as far as I'm concerned, I hope it's the first and the last time I catch a glimpse of the notorious dogman of Michigan.